First week of trial wraps up in Laredo, Texas for a Border Patrol officer facing the death penalty. Prosecutors accuse him of killing his alleged mistress and young son over child support money. Ronald Burgos Aviles had a child with 28-year-old Griselda Hernandez while married to another woman with children of his own. In March of 2018, Hernandez reportedly served the defendant child support documents at his workplace, and police say that Burgos Aviles arranged an in-person meeting the following month with Hernandez and their nearly 2-year-old son. At that meeting, prosecutors accused the defendant of stabbing them to death, all in an effort to avoid Hernandez child support money, paying that up. This week, several officers testified for the prosecution, detailing Burgos Aviles' at times bizarre behavior at the crime scene and while detained. Photos of injuries on the defendant were shown to the jury as well, along with evidence of his police radio, cell phone, and DNA being present at the murder site. Because the defendant works in law enforcement, defense attorneys challenged witnesses on their statements before and after they realized a fellow officer was the prime suspect. But Friday, words were heard directly from the defendant's own mouth through his police interrogation on the day of the murders.
I'm not leaving things out. I'm nervous, and I'm telling you to the best of my ability, but as we keep talking about this, pieces are coming in, and I'm telling you.
You go to a gruesome crime scene, and you're grabbing shoes, and you're grabbing strollers, and you're not being appropriate about your communications with 940. 940 needs to call it, but that's not your jurisdiction. That's a murder investigation.
So that's mother and child right there, man.
Yes.
They're gone, and he's back to your son. And you just thinking about yourself kind of thing? Or?
No, I'm not.
Based on what we know right now, you want us to stop what we're doing?
No.
And turn our attention away from you and go somewhere else?
No, I don't want you guys to do that.
No, but that only a rational person can say that. I mean, you want us to stop what we're doing and go somewhere else?
No, I want you guys to do your job.
And you want us to let you go?
No. You guys are still
No, we can't be Why am I in I don't even, we already know each other. Why can't I take it personally?
Your partner is saying that he's like, I know you did it. I think it, whatever he said, right? He straight up accusing me. That's his personal opinion, so I know for a fact that he don't like me. You're being very patient with me. You don't believe me either, so I know you don't like me either.
That's not about lying, bro.
I mean, I know you guys say guilty, I know, and in a way I understand, believe me, in a way I understand, but in another way, you gotta understand, like, I feel cornered, man.
Terry, here's the thing. Oftentimes, the first person to discover the body is going to be questioned as a person of interest, right? So why would the defendant put himself in that position?
Jesse, I think it's all ego. He is trying to control that scene. He thinks he can direct the other officers away from himself. Little did he realize they were already focused on him, because they did get information right after they got to the scene that the victim basically said she was going to meet someone by his name at the scene. So immediately those officers began to hone in on him, and you saw there the questioning they did. And that information, based on what we've seen at trial, the testimony of officers, was corroborated by cell phone data, and also DNA data is going to be corroborated as well. So I think he made a mistake trying to be there and control the situation. It definitely backfired against him.
Now, Judge, this case is being tried in Texas. It's a horrible crime, but do you think it should be a death penalty case?
Well, that obviously has two different pathways to answer. First, under Texas's death penalty statute, and every state has their own, he qualifies for the death penalty. There was a child under 10 that was murdered here. There was multiple people that were killed. There were two circumstances that justify the death penalty. But whether and under what circumstances to pursue the death penalty is really a question that is being bandied about in our country. And we've seen that the reduction in the death penalty in many states because of the question of its effectiveness, its unfairness with regard to race and gender and socioeconomic status, its question of whether or not it actually is deterrence. So whether they should, that's another question completely.
It's understandable why they pursued it. Just look at the pictures of the victims. I think enough is said right there. We now know when rapper YNW Melly's co-defendant will head to trial. On Friday, the court scheduled his murder trial to start October 2nd. Cortland Henry, also known by the moniker YNW Bortland, was at the Broward County Courthouse Friday morning for a hearing. Henry is charged with 2 counts of murder alongside Jamel Demmons. They were seen on surveillance getting into a car with Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams in October of 2018. A short time later, Henry showed up at a Miami area hospital with Thomas and Williams bleeding out in his car. They were both pronounced dead from gunshot wounds. Henry claimed there was a drive-by shooting, but investigators say the shots came from inside the SUV. Henry's hearing on Friday was to address conditions of his pretrial release. While Melly has been locked up, Henry was on house arrest. His defense attorney told the judge that Henry wants to work and go to church. He promises to adhere to drug testing and checking in with a probation officer. But the state says Henry has violated the pretrial conditions before. The judge ultimately denied this motion. This co-defendant's hearing comes as week 3 of the YNW Melly murder trial wraps up and the court goes on a long break. In fact, they're off next week and they're going to return on July 10th. Now this week we heard more testimony from expert witnesses, including the medical examiners and a crime scene reconstructionist. They revealed that both Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams died from shots to the head and their bodies were riddled with bullets after those fatal shots. The crime scene expert said he did multiple reconstructions and determined that the shots came from the back seat of the SUV behind the driver. Christopher Thomas's mother, Leandra Phillips, identified her son as one of the victims for the court, as well as the defendant, one of her son's closest friends.
Do you recognize where your son entered that gray Jeep?
Yes.
Which seat, if you can identify for the jury?
He got in the back seat on the right hand side.
Did you recognize the individual that got into the back seat on the left side, the rear driver's side?
Yes.
And who was that individual?
Jamel.
And Jamel, is that the defendant, Jamel Demons?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you know him by another name?
Melly.
And do you see Melly Jamel Demons in the court?
Yes, I do.
I'm joined right now by my co-host, former trial attorney, and also YNW Melly trial correspondent, Terry Austin, fresh from Florida, plus today's special guest, retired Judge Savannah Rucker. Great to have you both here. Terry, I'll start with you. So Cortland Henry wanted to modify his current release agreement. What did you make of the prosecution's argument against it?
I thought they were very strong. She started out by saying, look, Your Honor, he's already violated his probation agreement. And with that, I think the judge is thinking to himself, well, you had an opportunity. This is a privilege. It's not something that you are automatically given, and you've violated. The other issue is he's trying to say that he wants to travel and he wants to do the Eastern Seaboard. He wants to go to the Midwest. And the prosecutor basically said, look, there's no way I can control that. So that's also another great reason. And also no reason to stay out beyond midnight. So that's why.
Well, Judge Rucker, as a judge, you have to consider both sides of the argument. Would you have also denied Henry's motion?
Under these circumstances, yes. I mean, what we're talking about is clearly a very violent crime. Although he is currently on house arrest, the suggestion is that he's previously violated the terms. He's looking to expand his ability to be out and about and have some flexibility in his movement. But due to the nature of the case, due to the fact that he has already violated, and really the reason that he wants to have expanded time, it's flexible. But as a judge, I would have most likely denied it as well.
Yeah, and interesting to see him because so much has been talked about him during the course of this trial.